How is it justifiable, ethical, and indeed moral to have books in our elementary, middle schools, and high schools with words so offensive that they are prohibited to be spoken in a public meeting?
We're not allowed to read the books that are currently in our children's libraries because it's obscene, but you voted to put those books back on the shelves.
And the books are so bad, Miss Pippin wasn't even allowed to read them in a public meeting. Every time she tried, it was stopped. So you can't say that it's good for students, but not good to read in a public meeting.
I would guess most of us in this room stood and pledged our allegiance to the American flag. One nation, only one, and under God. We don't divide people by their color of their skin, and we recognize one God, one higher power.
I'm speaking to you today as a concerned citizen and urge you to listen to parents in this county that are requesting a review of certain books in our schools. Children or minors under the age of 18 are not allowed to purchase cigarettes, liquor, Playboy or Hustler magazines in our local stores, or walk into a XXX theater unchecked and watch a movie. However, there is currently in our school libraries, which I have seen and read, that have quite explicit sexual language and illustrations in them. I recently also learned that this school board does not allow the reading of passages from these books in these public meetings, dubbing them as obscene. Truly, I was surprised at this, and it is the reason that prompted me to speak up today. How is it justifiable, ethical, and indeed moral to have books in our elementary, middle schools, and high schools with words so offensive that they are prohibited to be spoken in a public meeting? Would you say the same thing about the pictures that appear, the illustrations that appear in some of these books if I show them to you? Would you be offended and ask me to put them away and keep them hidden? Then why do we have them available for underage children to view? What happened to protecting our children's innocence? In conclusion, I have 3 simple points. Number 1, I urge you to listen to the parents here trying to do the right thing in protecting their children from topics that are too adult-like and mature for their age. It is their right as parents to protect their children from words and pictures that they are not yet mature enough to process. Number 2, I want to express my support for this board's policy and procedures regarding these books and urge all of you on the board to please support it, but more importantly, to deliver on it. I thank you all in advance, as I am assuming that you will all do the right thing and remove books from our school libraries that include mature sexualized content. These books should be vetted and reviewed and removed. And last, I urge you to edit the citizen input guidelines so that parents and the community may have meaningful and fruitful discussions on this topic. Nothing is accomplished by putting our heads in the sand so that you don't have to see what is happening. Thank you for listening.
I wanted to speak today on the DeSantis hit list or target list. I don't like that the media is calling it that, and DeSantis didn't call it that. We're holding our elected officials accountable. You represent the community. And if you're not protecting children and putting children and families in the best interest by parental rights and children, you're not doing your job. And you see all the news outlets here, I'm sure you're getting lots of calls. When we tell you you're breaking the law or you're not following the governor's orders or the health department orders, it doesn't stop here. We're sending that information to our elected officials in Tallahassee. We're sending it to our representative, our senators, like we're supposed to do as citizens. So if it falls on deaf ears here, it doesn't stop here. It goes up to further government. Unfortunately, a lot of things and issues that happened here in Indian River County the past couple of years fell on deaf ears. The mask mandate that violated the governor's orders, the 2 people that are up for re-election in 2024, you voted for that. We told you it was breaking the law. You voted to put pornography, sexually explicit content, and critical race theory back on the shelves a year ago this month. We're not allowed to read the books that are currently in our children's libraries because it's obscene, but you voted to put those books back on the shelves. And guess what? We went through legislation, and we have a new parental rights law in education now. We have a new library vetting committee, and those books are going to be permanently removed. They will be permanently removed. Okay?
Quiet, please. Thank you.
So I know one of you asked in the news, how does DeSantis know our voting records? Again, we sent all that information to him because he can't know what's going on in 67 counties. It's our job as the citizens to let our elected officials know what's going on. And you know what? If you always followed the law and you always followed the rules, you would have nothing to worry about. But this case, again and again and again, we're getting letters from the Department of Education. We're getting letters. There's been multiple Department of Education letters that have come to this board that said we're not in compliance. There's 2 we currently have now, and I know they're getting discussed later. So what we ask as citizens is to follow the laws, follow the rules, respect parental rights, and be best by all children and not just some children. Thank you.
As a parent, I wanted to say my full support for the governor's woke list. Through the chair, I remember when you and Mr. Barefoot voted to violate the governor's executive order, as well as going against the Surgeon General's directive and forced mandatory masking on children without parental opt-out. The district got a letter from the Florida Department of Education about this, saying that you were wrong. I also remember when the board decided to violate Sunshine Law in order to allow pornographic books back into the hands of school children. And the books are so bad, Ms. Pippin wasn't even allowed to read them in a public meeting. Every time she tried, it was stopped. So you can't say that it's good for students, but not good to read in a public meeting. And also, it looks like the board got a letter from the Florida Department of Education stating the violation of Sunshine also. I just wanted to say that these 2 school board members have not done best by children, should not be reelected for these positions. I came to every meeting for 2 years to only have 1 school board member listen, and I'm happy now that there's another one that replaced the person who was here last. I wholeheartedly agree with Governor DeSantis' analysis of the actions of these 2 school board members up for election. It seems that the state still listens better than our own school board. Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I thought we'd review some duties of elected officials. 1, you should err on the side of too much transparency, not too little. For those of you who are expert in education law, if meetings are held about parent input from the meetings, and from those meetings came recommendations approved by the board and implemented by the superintendent, experts, I'm asking you, should the meetings be in sunshine? You should use common sense as elected officials. The Library Book Review Committee did send you recommendations, which you did approve, and the superintendent did implement using district staff. You knew their meetings were not held in sunshine. They were not fact-finding, air quotes I understand, meetings, and you expect, and all of the experts knew it. When all of it was pointed out to you, you still refused to admit that they were held illegally. You have a fiduciary responsibility to the taxpayers of this county to use their dollars wisely. In ignoring the obvious, whatever the reasons, you wasted taxpayer money and time, because now the district has to answer the legal challenges. Those attorney fees should come out of your pockets, not ours. And because the consulting attorney was clearly in the wrong, maybe it should come out of hers. And you need the means to call her out on that. Common sense tells us the only way to cure this is to review the books again in sunshine. And that arduous task, the one that you hailed the last superintendent for struggling through in the darkness, that time and trouble is not ours. I have to add for the record that I've read a couple of things lately. No one I know asked that books about Harriet Tubman or Roberto Clemente or any other historical figure be removed from our libraries. In fact, we want kids to be taught all of our history, particularly about those people of color who struggled, who were courageous, who studied, and who achieved. No one wants to divide us except those with an agenda. Lastly, I would guess most of us in this room stood and pledged our allegiance to the American flag. one nation, only one, and under God. We don't divide people by their color of their skin, and we recognize one God, one higher power. And when we all get back to those premises, our kids will not suffer, and we ask God to help us. Thank you.
Tonight I'm bringing to your attention a book located in Erie Elementary's library. It's called It Feels Good to Be Yourself, a book about gender identity. This book doesn't contain sexually explicit language, but it does include information about transgender, cisgender, non-binary, and that some people can be both a boy and a girl. When you look up this book on Erie's online catalog, it doesn't say that this book needs parental consent or that this book is in the media clerk's office. This book must sit on a shelf for any kindergartner through 5th grader to check out. Here are a few pages from the book. She's a transgender girl. That means when she was born, everyone thought she was a boy, until she grew a little older, old enough to tell everyone she's actually a girl. There are so many different ways to be a boy or a girl, too many to fit into a book. But not everyone feels like either a boy or a girl. Non-binary is a helpful word that can describe a kid who doesn't feel exactly like a boy or a girl. JJ is neither a boy nor a girl. Ever since JJ was very little, they never felt exactly like a boy or a girl. They just felt like himself. This is JJ's gender identity. See, when you were born, you couldn't tell people who you were or how you felt. They looked at you and made a guess. Maybe they got it right, maybe they got it wrong. Do you think this book is appropriate for every child to check out? Every parent has the right to raise and educate their children consistent with their beliefs and values. If you are a parent that would like to teach your children about these kinds of things, that is your right. If a parent doesn't want to teach their children about these things, that is also their right. If this book remains in the library, then the library also needs to have a book called God Made Boys and Girls, Helping Children Understand the Gift of Gender, God Made Me. We have to listen to all parents, right? Here's a small passage from the website The American Spectator. Most kindergartners don't know how to read, tie their shoes, or recite their home ec. But instead of teaching the academic basics, schools are now actively promoting identity confusion, emotional harm, and insecurity, negative impacts that last a lifetime. It's no wonder that a child and adolescent's mental health issues are on a steep rise when students are taught to question their own identity and select from an ever-growing list of confusing options. I have a master's degree in early childhood development. I taught kindergarten for 6 years and first grade for 1 year. Young minds are impressionable. What does this mean? Children are easily influenced by other people. Yes. My last comment tonight to the board. I would love to know why during From and By the Board, the majority of you sit there and say nothing about these books. Yeah. I have heard that some of you don't support these books being in our schools. I've also heard that some of you are not fans of the union, yet you have nothing to say. Do you know the impact that it would have even if you said, I don't support these books being in our school, but there's a procedure that needs to be followed? Besides Robert, not a single board member has publicly stated that these books are not age appropriate. I'm almost done. Have the courage to be disliked. Will we hear from you tonight, or will you allow your strings to continue to be pulled to tell you what to think and say? Yeah.